voice. Okay. Hi, guys.
Howdy.
All right, so probate deals can seem really overwhelming and like it's a lot of work. And there are some parts that are quite a bit more work, but really in all, once you have the time frames and extra steps down, you'll be able to perform a type of transaction that most agents aren't familiar with. You're also going to find that a lot of agents who have probate listings are not actually handling them appropriately. And so after this class today, you should be able to make sure that you and your clients have the best opportunity to get a chance at making an offer on a probate property. Okay, so we're going to start with a sort of like an outline cheat sheet that I put together this morning. And once we go through those, then we're going to go through both the purchase contract and the listing contract and the subsequent addendums that would be required for any of them. I want to start by saying that there are two different types of probate sales. One requires court confirmation and one does not. The one that does not is almost like a standard transaction. So we'll go over what occurs in both of them initially, and then we're going to primarily focus on court confirmation probates because that is the type that requires the extra steps you'll need to be aware of in order to properly perform your duties. All right, so we're going to start at the beginning, selling probate homes in California. So estate administration is designed to provide for the orderly distribution of property, both real and personal, owned by the descendant. Probate is the legal term for the process of administering the estate and its assets. An estate can also be interchangeably used with the word assets. So the process is supervised by the probate court, and an estate's representative is a person who's responsible for administering the estate. And so there are two types of representatives. And the first one is someone who's named in a will. So if someone who owns property or other assets has a will, then the person who administers the estate is referred to as the executor. If in fact there is a will that doesn't identify a person who should be in charge of what happens with the assets, or there is no will, then there's a process through the court, and that person is referred to as the administrator. So an executor or an administrator for you is nearly one and the same. Basically, they are, for all intents and purposes, in a real estate transaction, the seller. It's the person who is going to be making the decisions and is going to be your point of contact. On a very rare occasion, someone will pass away and they have no descendants and they have no will, or they do have a will. And there is then usually, but not always, an attorney that's representing the estate. So in this instance, I don't know that they would be referred to as the administrator or the executor, just the attorney who is handling the disposition of all the assets of the estate. All right, so also on occasion there's a will, and it dictates that a certain person should be handling the assets upon someone's death, but they don't want to, or their family thinks that perhaps they should not be in charge of the estate. Maybe they have financial issues, maybe they have health issues. Perhaps it's a contentious situation and there are multiple people named in the will, and Miss Jane Smith doesn't want to be in charge because she doesn't want to deal with her brothers and sisters who are angry. So through court process, the court can also go ahead and appoint someone different. So now that you know the difference between an executor, which means it's someone named in the will, and an administrator, someone who's appointed by the court, who's either not named in a will or someone replacing whoever was named in the will, we're going to move on to what the purpose of probate is. So this administrator or executor, their duty and responsibility is to first gather all of the assets, and secondly, pay all of the debts of the descendant, which is what we would refer to as the person who passed, okay, and ensure that the heirs and beneficiaries, so sometimes there aren't heirs, there may be a beneficiary, maybe someone decided to leave all of their earthly possessions to a charity of some sort, that would be a beneficiary, so that they receive the maximum inheritance. So most of the time, whoever the personal representative is, and that's the general term for that executor or administrator, they're going to hire a probate attorney because this is quite complicated. As far as time frames are concerned, the actual court process of probate is not actually that difficult. All right, so when are homes sold through probate? First and foremost, I want you all to know that if a property is held in trust, this is literally the one and only way to avoid probate with or without court confirmation. So if I have a client and they do not own their home in title of a trust, my advice to them is they probably should. And it's one of my marketing pieces and email blasts that I usually send out annually to my clients. So it's always good advice to your client that they understand unless they have a trust upon, their untimely death, will or no will, their family and beneficiaries are going to have to go through the process of probate. All right, so if there is a will, it may state in the actual will that the property should be sold. Most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time a will says that my property will be given to such and such person or should be split amongst certain people. All right, when there is not a will, there's actually California state law that dictates how beneficiaries receive property, inheritance property. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So the personal representative, they have to comply with the descendant's instructions in the will. So if the will says the property has to be sold, it absolutely has to be sold. If it does not say it has to be sold, they may choose to sell it, they may not choose to sell it. So any deviation from the instructions in the will, a court order has to be issued in order for those actions to take place. Like I said, if the will does not make mention of the disposition of real estate property, or if there is no will, and they do decide to sell, once again, it has to be court order. Sometimes, even though the will does not state that the property needs to be sold, there are debts that the person who passed, the descendant, has. Those debts legally have to be paid, and so the court may actually issue order that either the beneficiaries of the descendant either pay these debts in full, or more likely they're probably going to sell the property because they don't have these funds to pay off these debts they may not have even known existed. Let's see. So the executor or the administrator, they have to have authority to act. So whether or not the will says that they have authority, this has to be confirmed by the court. And so when they hire a probate attorney, the probate attorney goes to the court and they ask for a court hearing. And the purpose of the court hearing is to get something called letters. These letters, there are two types. There are letters testamentary, or there are letters of administration. All right, so letters testamentary are when there is no will. Letters of administration are when there is a will. Makes no difference to you as a real estate agent, but you do need to have either letters of administration or letters testamentary. And title and escrow are going to need to see these letters in order to actually close any sort of sale. Thank you. I'll give you a second. Does anyone else need a printout, handout? This package? No? You got it?
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
So once these letters are issued by the court, the letters are going to specify, first off, who the representative with authority is, but also they're going to identify whether or not there is full authority or limited authority. Full authority and a limited authority tells you right then and there whether or not it's going to require court confirmation. If there is limited authority, it means that court confirmation will be required for a sale if a sale is what the parties involved want to do, or if the will specifies that it has to be done. Is everyone with me on this? All right. So there are multiple types of ways that homes are sold through probate in our state. And by the way, every state has different rules regarding how assets and beneficiaries are distributed and received. For us, the only one that's going to be relevant is the one I have listed first, which is through a real estate agent. All right. So the personal representative, the administrator or executor, and I'm just going to call it personal representative from this point forward, so I don't have to use both of those terms. They are in charge, like I said before, for all intents and purposes, they're your seller. They're the ones who legally have the authority to choose their real estate agent. I can't tell you how many listing appointments I've been on where this representative has no idea that it is them who actually gets to choose their listing agent. Why? Because most of the time a probate attorney works with a real estate agent, usually someone who refers them a lot of business, and they introduce the seller to this real estate agent. Okay, so versus, I mean, you can go directly after the representatives of estates, but versus doing that, it may be more advantageous if you want to specialize in probate to try to build a relationship with probate attorneys. All right. If any potential client ever talks to you about hiring an attorney to administer the estate, it's probably very important that you mention to them, it can't be just any attorney. It really needs to be a probate attorney. A lot of attorneys will try to do probate. They will say they can do probate, but it would be like hiring a personal injury attorney to oversee your real estate transaction, right? It's just, it's own special niche. So that would be good advice to give to your client. All right, moving on to page 2. So I'm just gonna briefly skip over the 3 other ways a probate property can be sold. Private sale, very uncommon. Public auction, again, very uncommon. Private auction, extremely uncommon. All right, listing probate homes. So now we're going to go into the process of listing probate homes. So the representative, who is, for all intents and purposes, our seller, it's like selling a regular home, right? But I'm going to go over some exceptions and additions here. So first and foremost, the court's going to require that the home that's being sold in probate is either confirmed or not confirmed by the court. So if it's required to be confirmed by the court, this is referred to in our real estate language as probate sale requiring court confirmation. So this is limited authority. Remember, I told you, for all intents and purposes, letters of administration or letters of testamentary, also referred to as letters, either have limited or full authority that grants authority to the representative named in that court order. So limited means court confirmation, full authority means non-court confirmation. And all of this is governed under something referred to as the IAEA, the Independent Administration of the States Act. This is all California state law. All right, so a representative is going to petition the court, or more likely their probate attorney is going to petition the court for the approval of the sale if it requires confirmation. If it does not require court confirmation, the seller is simply going to hire a real estate agent and you're going to put it on the market. So when the court requires confirmation of the sale, there are some particular specifications that need to be met. So the court dictates, and state law dictates, that the sales price that's accepted and that the price that the home ultimately sells for is within at least 90% of the appraised value set within 1 year of the sale. There's something special about this appraised value. So this appraised value is actually done by someone called a court referee. A court referee is a court-appointed appraiser. And generally speaking, I'm sure there are some exceptions, they are a really crummy appraiser. Not only that, they don't personally, physically enter the property. They do a drive-by appraisal. This can cause you a lot of problems, right? So if you've got a probate sale, a lot of times it's older people who haven't remodeled in a long time, who had been in poor health. They may not have been a great planner, considering they don't have a trust, and they may not have even had a will. I would say majority of the time, these homes are in pretty poor condition. So this home could be in a great neighborhood, on a great street, where your average sales price is $2 million. But the condition of this home could actually mean that this home is worth significantly less. But you're gonna be in a whole lot of trouble if you don't get ahead of this, because the court referee is gonna drive by, see that maybe it's not the nicest home on the block, but these are all $2 million homes on this block of the same property lot size and the same general square footage. And so they're gonna maybe say that the home is worth, let's say, 1.8 million. But you as the agent, you go inside and I mean, you see mold, you see wood rot, you see stuff that hasn't been cleaned in years, tons of deferred maintenance, you know, landscaping that's been neglected for 10 years plus. This may obviously significantly decrease the value of the home, right? So once you're involved in this and the letters are issued from the court, it's very important you reach out to the probate attorney if it's court confirmation. And you ask for contact information for this court referee, aka the really crummy court appointed appraiser. The reason why is, what would you do to try to help make sure that this court referee appraises the property at a reasonable price so that you can sell it within the 90% requirement?
You're gonna give him comps.
Yeah, you're gonna give him comps, but he's not going in. So what else are you gonna do? You're gonna go in there, yeah, you're gonna take pictures. You're gonna make lengthy notes about the condition of the property, all right? So you wanna make sure all of this information is 100% ready to go the second that the probate attorney gets letters. And you're gonna also constantly be a squeaky wheel calling the probate attorney, because he may or may not yet have the court referee's contact information. And the second you can, you want to get that over, because it's a whole lot easier to get that information over and make phone calls trying to get in front of it than it is to try to get them to revise that appraisal once it's made. Yes?
I'm just wondering that the fact that they do this drive-by, it's the most inaccurate appraisal you can ever get. Who came up with this idea?
I don't know, it's state law.
It's almost not even like something that makes sense to real estate.
It does not make sense to real estate whatsoever.
They go by numbers, probably. Square footage, lot
Yes,
size.
they use public records, they drive by, and generally speaking, so the fees that are paid to court referees, I believe, are significantly lower than what's normally paid to an appraiser. So what appraisers are performing this service? Usually appraisers that don't have a lot of business. They usually don't have a lot of business because either A, they're inexperienced, or B, they're just not very good at their job. There are exceptions, so I'm not gonna say that all court referees suck, for whatever court referee is watching out there. One day maybe. So just make sure you're ahead of it. Set yourself up for success. Also, if you're trying to go after probate business, remember I told you your very best source to find that business is through a probate attorney. When you know things like this and you make sure they're aware that you know things like this, you're much more likely to get business from them, okay? All right, so now that you've been a really good agent and made sure you didn't set yourself up for disaster, I want you to know that, let's see. I guess I should note this now, even though it's later in our documentation. Listing agreements for probate property cannot exceed 90 days in length. The listing term that you write into your listing contract cannot exceed 90 days in length.
And why is that?
What's that?
Why is that?
Why is that? It's state law. So, let's say you have the listing for 90 days and it does not sell. You can get a listing extension. The listing extension can't be for more than a new additional 90 days. I've actually never had that happen, so I'm gonna back that up and say, I'm not sure if it's an extension or if you have to sign a whole new listing agreement. Just know that in either case, and at that point, you can talk to the probate attorney and find out which one it is that they need, the extension or a whole new listing agreement. But once again, cannot exceed 90 days. All right. I've already said this, but non-court confirmation is not subject to any of this, but it is still subject to that 90 days, okay? So that's the one really big difference when you're setting up your listings. If it's a non-court confirmation required probate, 90 days, but otherwise you put it on the MLS, you do everything you've got to do. You just have a few additional pieces of documentation. All right, so moving on. Oh, here's where it comes to the 90 days on my sheet here. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and scan and upload this to a link to wherever I post my videos, which you can get off my Facebook, my Instagram. If you are a mentee or if you sign into the sign-in sheet here, make sure your email address is legible and put a note next to it that you'd like me to include you on the email list for the links. I'll do that also.
Where's your sign-in sheet?
Anyone have the sign-in sheet?
I have it.
All right, so it's coming around.
Okay.
All right, so let's see. Another really important thing for you to know. So now you've got your 90-day court confirmation listing. First off, when you enter it into the MLS, there are going to be some special disclosures you have on there. There are special questions that ask you if it's a probate, and you're going to say yes. Then there's a separate question that asks you if it requires court confirmation or not. In this instance, you're going to say yes. You're going to say no, obviously, if it doesn't. Yes, if it does. But also under the disclosure drop-down box in the MLS input section, and that's also referred to as SLIM, S-L-I-M-M. There will be a disclosure section. You will have to, on the disclosure section, in the drop-down box, select as is. I don't know if there's a no contingencies disclosure box there, but if there is one there, you would also select that. And then I believe there's a section there that you just, under the disclosure drop-down portion when you're entering your listing, I think there is one that says probate, and it may or may not talk about confirmation or not confirmation there. So if there is in the disclosure section, there's a drop-down, and I think it's usually toward the beginning of your entry process. You put that there, but later in the MLS entry form for listings, there's also questions that ask you yes and no about it, all right? Third, I want you every single time, not under just agent remarks, but under the public comments section, I want you to make sure that you enter that this is a probate requiring court confirmation. Because this needs to be public information as well as private. You may want to do yourself a favor and also put in the agent's private remarks that all offers should be submitted on the probate purchase agreement, because there aren't tons of probate sales out there. So unless you're really familiar with it, you might have buyer's agents submitting offers to you on the standard offer form, and that is not the correct form. So you'd probate purchase agreement, and I actually have it printed out, and I actually have a section where I list all of the special documents required for probate deals later in this little handout that I put together. Okay? You're welcome. So the other important thing for you to notate, probably in agent remarks, but also know for yourself and disclose to any potential buyers, is that there are absolutely no credits, repairs, or contingencies whatsoever allowed in a probate court confirmation sale. Non-confirmation, like I said, it's like a standard sale other than a few documents and needing the letters from either the executor or the administrator. But you'll want to go ahead and disclose that up front.
Sorry, just what if you can repeat that?
Oh, sure. Do you have the handout? It's written here at the bottom of the second page. Probate sale requiring court confirmation do not allow contingencies, repairs, or credits. You're welcome.
So if it's a loan,
We'll talk about that in a second. We'll talk about a buyer with a loan in a second. All right, also, just as you plan to prep a listing for market and you have to do photos and things like this in advance and get marketing materials ready, there is a special requirement for probate with court confirmation sales. And I'm not sure actually, and you'll want to check on this, I'm not sure if it requires the non-court confirmation, so I'm not even going to speculate there. When in doubt, I'd go ahead and do it. But the requirement is that you ensure that a notice of sale is published publicly. That usually means in print in the most well-known newspaper in the area. So, you know, like under the announcement sections in newspapers, you'll see birth announcements, marriage announcements, death announcements. You'll also see probate sale announcements. So if you have investor clients or clients who are willing to do a lot of work and looking for a bargain, FYI, a lot of people stay away from probate sales thinking they're scary, very complicated. One of the best ways to find a great buy for an investor client is to scour these probate sale notices. And this will be the earliest you'd see this property because it's before it goes on the MLS, right? And so now your investor client or your client who's looking for a major fixer or something they can tear down can all of a sudden check out specs you send to them to drive by, that sort of thing. All right. So as far as the requirements for publicly having published this notification, on page 3 at the top in the second paragraph I indented, it says that the newspaper must publish no less than once a week, at least 3 times over a period of no less than 10 days before the sale. The third publication must be at least 5 days after the first publication. All right, so that means 3, right? And those time frames seem kind of sticky to deal with. I would probably schedule my very first newspaper ad to go in, to coincide with when I put it on the MLS. So if I'm going to go ahead and put my probate listing on the MLS, I'm gonna make sure that the LA Times has my notification being published that weekend or that week or whatever. I'm probably, just because I'd rather be safe than sorry, go ahead and do it consecutively for 3 weeks. These are not costly ads, by the way. So don't think that they're like our LA Times ads where we're putting properties in, because they're just small boxes that have information. Uh-oh.
Sorry.
All right. Sorry, guys at home. Was not an earthquake. Uh-oh. Let's see here. Hi. There's going to be a second time you're going to want to publish information, and that's later in the process. This is after you have an accepted offer and the court has scheduled a date for confirmation and overbid. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, okay? So you're going to have this published and you're going to have it run. Once that happens and you have the property listed, oh, by the way, the court may actually ask for proof of this stuff. So you're going to want to keep records and copies of these ads. All right. Let's say you have an agent or a buyer who's upset and thinks maybe you didn't get them access to the property. We all have stuff like this even on our normal listings, right? Where people complain, said they didn't get a fair shot at the property. So you're going to want to keep copies of this proof of these publications. On top of it, you should be keeping records financially because these are tax write-offs for you. Okay, so once it's listed, you have to make every reasonable effort to show the property whenever possible. And most of the time, these properties, they're priced really well, so you're going to have a lot of interest. I see a lot of probate listings that are on the MLS that don't do open houses or don't do private showings, or say drive by and then call. A lot of times these homes are emptied of personal belongings, so the easiest way to do it would be to put it on Supra or combo lockbox, but you do have to keep in mind that your seller just went through possibly a very painful loss of a loved one. They may be very emotional and protective of the home. That may not always be an option for you. So it's really important that you probably have another agent or someone else cross-trained on the property, that you compensate somehow to do showings on the property. But in any case, you do have to make it available. Now, we're going to come to buyers with loans. I also see in the MLS a lot of times where listing agents erroneously say that all probate court confirmation deals have to be purchased cash. That is absolutely 100% false. Buyers can purchase a probate property with court confirmation with a loan. But what happens is they need to go ahead and have the entire loan approval and process complete prior to the court date where there's overbid and confirmation of the sale. And if you don't understand what overbid and confirmation is, don't worry, we're going to go over that shortly, okay? So what does this mean for a buyer with a loan? Well, it means that they're putting themselves possibly at some financial risk. So if a buyer with a loan goes to the property, wants to make an offer on it, first and foremost, they're gonna be performing inspections. They're gonna be paying for their lender's appraiser to go out. And they're gonna have their credit run, basically go through the formal process of loan approval. But at any time at court confirmation, someone can come in and overbid them, and they have no opportunity to purchase the property. So this is why a lot of probate court confirmation sales go to cash buyers, because it's a lot of risk to your average loan buyer. They have to go through all of this work, and a lot of loan officers are unwilling to do this kind of work. Any loan officer that you work with that's unwilling, you probably want to start looking for someone else, because it's about your relationship with them, right? And what they do for your clients, it reflects on you. So make sure that you talk to any potential lender that is working with your client if you guys are thinking about going ahead and moving forward with a probate offer. That requires court confirmation. Non-court confirmation, no problem. Hi.
Things changed that much in the last 10 years regarding probate sales?
No, things have not really changed in 10 years regarding probate sales.
About 9 years ago, 10 years ago, Santa Monica.
Well, so different cities and different counties have slightly different regulations regarding probate sales. All of the information I'm giving you goes across the board as far as minimum requirements. Some cities can have additional requirements. None in this area that I'm aware of. However, Santa Monica, from what I remember, because I've done 2 in Santa Monica, they usually have faster turn time on the court dates and things like that. Was there something different about your Santa Monica purchase?
No, basically it was at the time it was 1.1 million, and they changed all the windows. It was like really cheap windows, but the rest of the house was original.
Was it a court confirmation requirement?
Yeah, court confirmation.
I mean, so the administrator or the executor, right, the representative, for all intents and purposes, our seller, if they have money in the estate, they can choose to go ahead and make repairs to the property or upgrade it. And they can take it off the market and put it back on the market, as long as it doesn't violate any of the terms of either the court order, which is usually based upon the wishes of the family, or the terms identified in the will of the descendant. All right, so that's a possibility. That's very, very unusual. Most people are not making repairs to the home. My guess would have been, if they're making repairs like that to the home, there must have been a huge issue that perhaps made it uninhabitable and made it therefore not able to be purchased with a loan. I don't know.
Yeah, because the original price was 1.2, and they brought it down to 1.1.
That can also happen because of a court referee maybe placing it too high, and the probate attorney maybe petitions the court to have a new court referee appraisal done. I don't know. I'd have to actually look into that one.
Somehow the judge made sure that it comes back to 1.2 before the sale is done. It was very strange.
That I don't know if there must have been an offer at 1.2.
No, there was a guy with a backpack. I don't know, he had cash in his
Cash is not allowed in any city, by the way, and we'll talk more about that later.
So the guy, just a quick brief thing, the guy would stop bidding, and it was just me and him and another general contractor who had to go again. He brought it to court, they let go. And the judge said, are you sure you don't want to go another 20,000? Are you sure?
Yeah, it's really like an auction, and there are incremental bids set up, and we'll talk more about that later. But if the price has to be a certain place, it's because either A, it has something to do with the court referee's appraised value, or B, because there's an accepted offer for something. All right. There could also be a very strange provision within the will or the court order that says the property can be sold as long as it's sold for a minimum value. That would be unusual, but that's a possibility too, right? We don't know what's in someone's will, so I can't really comment on that specific situation. But if you're a real estate agent who's going to represent someone with court confirmation probate, The probate attorney is going to make you aware of these things, so you don't need to know about all of the possibilities out there. I mean, there could be something as silly as the house has to be painted red prior to sale, right? There could be something really silly in there. All right, so moving forward, we were talking about how many agents erroneously tell the public that probate sales can only be purchased in all cash. All right, so you're gonna do all these showings, you're gonna make all of these newspaper ads, and then people are gonna make offers. So once an offer is accepted, and the person who decides what terms they accept it at, and this is usually just price, right, and close of escrow, because with court confirmation, there are no contingencies, there are no requests for repairs, no credits, anything like that. You're gonna accept this offer, and you're gonna go to the probate attorney, and you're gonna provide them with the accepted offer. Then the probate attorney is gonna go and petition the court for a court date, and at this court date is going to be what is called either, well, yes, overbid, open overbid, and court confirmation. So usually, also, by the way, the buyer's offer that gets accepted, you open escrow like you would on a normal deal, and they have to make their earnest money deposit within the standard 3 days unless otherwise negotiated. And now that the attorney has petitioned the court for the court date, typically the court is going to initiate a court date within 30 days. The moment that you have this court date, you need to go through and you need to modify all of your marketing materials, including the MLS public remarks and private remarks. That tells everyone where and when the court date's going to take place. You also need to disclose the accepted offer price. The reason that you would disclose the accepted offer price is because you need to provide what's called first overbid information. First overbid information is like the opening dollar amount the court will allow anyone to come in and purchase the property for, other than the original accepted buyer offer price. Okay? And the other thing you should really do so that you don't get yourself into trouble, and getting yourself into trouble on a court confirmation overbid is really going to damage your reputation and relationship with that probate attorney, right? Is you should probably pick up the phone and call anyone who expressed interest, or email anyone who expressed interest with the same information. Basically, you need to do your due diligence. Well, you need to protect yourself in making sure that you went through every reasonable measure to get this information publicly out to parties who expressed interest. All right, so this 30 plus days has passed, and now comes the date of the court hearing. I don't have this in my handout, but in order for the buyer whose offer was accepted to actually close on the sale, both you, the listing agent, the buyer, sorry, not just both. So the listing agent always has to be there for the court hearing, okay? The buyer whose offer is accepted needs to be there for the court hearing, and if they have an agent that is not you, that agent also has to be present. You will have people who show up to this court hearing who have no agent. Does anyone know what happens when someone comes to make overbid and maybe wins the property and they don't have an agent? Automatically, the listing agent represents them. Automatically. And FYI, the commission that's set for the listings for probate court confirmation, I can't remember, I think it's limited to 5.
It can't exceed 5%.
It can't exceed 5%, yes. And also, you have to split it 50-50, right? And all of this is set up that way through the court. There's no deviation. Let's see here. I actually went to one once where it was 5%, and they were offering the, yeah?
She didn't want to ask you.
Oh, yeah.
I had a question. If you have your own client that has an accepted offer, and then it goes to the court date, and there's an overbid, does that original buyer still have a chance to overbid
Absolutely.
the other, just like an auction, it goes back and forth?
Sort of.
Yes.
It is like an auction. There are a few differences, but yes.
I mean, is there a limit on how many times you can
No.
counter an overbid? No.
No.
And you have to have a different
We're gonna
cashier's checks?
We're gonna go over that. We're
Okay.
gonna go over that. All right. All right. So I actually went and did an overbid with a buyer client once, and we won. And I was able to, and I'm sure the listing agent hated my guts after this, but I was able to address the judge directly afterwards and say, Your Honor, I noticed on the MLS that compensation to the cooperating agent is at 2%. Can you confirm that the total commission is 4% on this transaction? Because by law, it's supposed to be equally split, right? It actually turns out it was 5, and the listing agent was trying to take 3. I don't think that they knew. I think that they were just trying to take 3 because, you know, it's easier to get away with stuff when the actual homeowner is not your seller. So guess what? I got 2.5. Yay!
Was that Sanborn Group, by chance?
No, it was not the Sanborn Group. He's referring to the Sanborn Group, which is led by Nancy Sanborn, and they are one of the, probably the best known team specializing in probate in the LA area. Do not call them if you need help with the probate. I had a title rep once tell me when I was asking a very complicated probate question that I should call Nancy Sanborn. And I thought, well, I'm probably never using you for title. Let me go call my competitor. No. All right. Let's see here. So everyone has to be present. There is a formula, and it is kind of a silly formula for calculating the first overbid amount. I actually have it written in here for you. We'll go over it on the whiteboard. But I want you to know that A, the original buyer can overbid in court. B, all overbids have to be in the form of a cashier's check, but not just the overbid amount. A total of 10% at court overbid is required in cashier's check in order for the overbidding buyer to successfully win the overbid. Now, the original buyer, they can put the standard 3% deposit in escrow, and I believe that they are only subject to bringing cashier's check in for the overbid amounts. And I'll explain that a little bit more after we do the formula for you. But any new bidder has to have a total of 10% of the total overbid purchase price ready. So that means even if the overbid amount is a very small amount, they have to make up the difference of 10% of the purchase price. So I know that probably doesn't make sense. That's why it's written in the handout. But we'll go over that now briefly. So the example I have written here is, let's say the accepted purchase price on a probate with court confirmation is $180,000, okay? Accepted price. And remember, we're gonna have all of this information publicly listed on the MLS, all right? And you're gonna give this information to any potential party that's interested in the property prior to the court date. All right, so if this is our accepted purchase price, the way that the law is written is really confusing. First, the way it's calculated is you start with 10% of the first $10,000 of the accepted purchase price. What's 10% of $10,000? So it's always going to be 1K, okay? All right, and then it's going to be 5% of the remaining balance. So if we're taking 10K, which is always that 1K, 10% of 10K, we're gonna have 170K left. And then you need, you know what, I'm just gonna make it easy. 5%. 5% of 170 is 8,500, right? So 8,500 plus 1K is 9,500, right? So the first overbid amount of the property is going to be 170 plus 95. So it's going to be 179,500. This is your first overbid amount set by the court, the way that California state law dictates it is calculated. All right. And so I know that's kind of confusing, it doesn't quite make sense, but I did write it here. If you plug in the numbers, the way I have it here, you will always have the correct amount for the first overbid. Yes?
For the overbid person who has a cashier's check for the $18,950, who verifies his 3%?
The bailiff.
The bailiff, how, in what form? How does he
It's
confirm?
in cashier's check, and we're getting there,
Okay.
right? All right, so if this is the first overbid amount, $179,500. Remember, I told you, any overbidder has to put a 10% deposit down, right? So what do they have to have a cashier's check? 10% of $179,500 is $17,950. So any potential overbidder has to have a cashier's check made out for $17,950. All right, that's 10% of this first overbid amount. Subsequently, if people want to bid over the first overbid amount, the judge is the one who decides at his or her discretion how much that next overbid amount is. And they don't follow this formula anymore because that would be very complicated to follow in a courtroom auction type setting, right? So depending upon the purchase price and how many parties are there, usually, like let's say in a really low end market, the judge might set a $1,000 increment. Usually in our market, it's a $5,000 to $10,000 increment. It's usually in a 5 or 10 form. So let's say that the property goes for $199,500 because it's been overbid now 3 times. The initial overbid amount, and then in 2 increments at $5,000. Now all of a sudden, you're gonna need a cashier's check for $18,950 to have the 10% deposit down needed to successfully secure that overbid. So what do I advise my clients that want to do overbids? I encourage them to go ahead, have the original 10% of the first overbid amount, and then bring multiple cashier's checks in increments usually of $5,000. I ask them generally to have a cap price in mind, right? What is the maximum dollar amount that you are willing to pay for this property? And I usually assist them with that by providing them comps and telling them what I think the current value of the property is. And if it's an investor or someone else like that, maybe what the potential value is. So they may be willing to pay slightly more than market value for a property because what they're going to do it still turns quite a profit for them. But you do want to have this conversation with any client you have that wants to go to an overbid so that they have enough as far as, incremental cashier's checks. In the case that they want to continue to overbid it, if it goes over the first overbid amount. Let's say no one shows up though, right? No one at all shows up. That original buyer gets the property without giving anyone any cashier's checks because they already have their earnest money deposit in escrow, and the court simply confirms the existing terms of the existing accepted offer. So, but let's say now somebody else did, and they brought in their cashier's checks. What happens now is the court confirms that, usually confirms the relationship between their agent if they have one. They will ask if they have an agent present. And that's how, if they don't have an agent, the judge now says, okay, the listing agent is representing you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no exceptions. Listing agent accepts the unrepresented bidder. All right?
And automatically gets a commission.
And automatically gets the commission. That's right. So, and just to reiterate, so the max was 5% commission total that you can charge on a probate. To both sides equally split. You can charge less. I don't know why you would want to. Maybe the probate attorney that is referring you the business says that you have to because that's part of the way they get their probate business, is that they say, well, I've got an agent that will do it for 4%, so your estate will end up with more funds.
That's not true because it's set, isn't it?
No, 5% or less.
5% or less.
5% or less. It's okay to do it for less, just not okay to do it for more. Just like with the listing period, it can be up to 90 days. It can be less, but it can never be more than 90 days. And honestly, I don't see why you would take less than 90 days because here's the deal. If you have to advertise for like 3 weeks straight, and then you have to advertise also when you get the court confirmation hearing date and the overbid amount, how are you gonna have time to do all that advertisement if it's anything less than 3 months? You're not. Okay, so what happens then is the court either confirms the existing purchase offer that was accepted previously, or they confirm the sale at the overbid. The court will then issue the court order, and if the original buyer lost out, cancellation instructions would be issued, and that buyer is going to get their funds back. And if it goes for overbid, then it's going to take a little while, sometimes a week, sometimes up to 3 weeks, for the court to actually issue the physical court order documents for you to be able to get a copy of them. Usually the probate attorney is the one securing those. Once he has them, he's going to give them to you. They need to go to escrow and title. Once escrow and title have them, they're going to begin working on everything. They're probably already working on everything, because under no circumstance, once the court order is actually received, can the remaining escrow term last any longer than 30 days. So once the court documents, the court order is received, 30 days. I think there is an exception, is maybe if the original offer had a longer escrow period, but I'd confirm that with the probate attorney. I can't remember if that's actually accurate or not. So once escrow has the court order, they're going to go through the process. You don't really have much to do at this point because there's nothing to negotiate. There's no request for repairs, there's no credits, there's no anything like that. All right? Just so you know, there is no way a buyer can cancel. Zero way a buyer can cancel. Not only is their offer confirmed, it's by court order. Oh, one of the most common mistakes that you'll see in a probate deal from either the listing agent or the buyer agent side is they will say, oh, we need a contract now that we have a new buyer. You do not. There is no contract. It's all off of court order. You follow the stipulations within the court order. When you have a transaction coordinator, you're not turning in a purchase contract. You're turning in the court order. All right? So if a buyer fails to close on time, there's no extension. There's no if, and, or but. It goes back to court. And what is the court going to do? The court is going to possibly impose a penalty or fine, but they're definitely losing their security deposit. All of it. Definitely losing the 10% deposit. Yes.
Question, what's the role of the probate attorney? Maybe I missed it. What's the role? What does he do?
Of the probate attorney?
Yes, what is he? I mean, I know he has to.
So I strongly encourage you guys to get to class on time, because this is going to be a very long class and I'm not going to have time to go over anything again. But the probate attorney basically handles initiating all of the proceedings.
Like the escrow.
Yeah, they're sort of like escrow before escrow gets involved. They're like escrow for the estate, the disposition of an estate.
And who pays them?
The estate does.
Estate
comes out of the estate's proceeds. If there are not enough proceeds, I don't know. I think that's up to the descendants. Yes,
So what
or
happens
the
if
beneficiaries.
What happens if the winner of the court confirmation can't go the rest of the money?
They lose their deposit, and the property gets listed again.
Can they go back to court?
Yes. So if the buyer who either is confirmed at the court hearing or overbids and is awarded the property, fails to close, then the court is going to take their deposit, possibly impose fine or penalty. I can't remember exactly what it is, but last time I checked, I think I read and I was like, oh, don't want to do that. It's a big problem. Definitely the property is going to be listed again.
The PR keeps the deposit? The PR keeps the deposit?
Oh, I believe that the beneficiaries keep the deposit.
The
Yeah.
agents don't get any.
Probably not the beneficiaries, because remember the estate still hasn't been disposed of entirely. So it's probably going to be funds allocated to the estate, and then it's going to be handed out however the court or the will specified it's going to be handed out. Let's see here.
So really quick, on the overbid process.
Yeah.
It happens at the day of the hearing?
Yeah, it actually happens in the courtroom.
So if nobody shows up?
Then you're good, you're golden. I actually had a probate listing where it was my buyer who was accepted, and the probate attorney that hired me or referred me, because really he didn't hire me, right? He doesn't have the authority to hire me. He referred me to the seller. There was no one in court, and our court case was called, but the probate attorney was not present. So they moved on and put us at the end. Well, my probate attorney showed up, and guess what? So did an overbidder, and I didn't get the buyer's side. The overbidder got the property. So
boy.
because the probate attorney was late, I didn't get the buyer's side. It happens. Okay, let's see here.
Is escrow and title split or paid all by the estate?
Oh, it's paid customarily.
It is,
Yeah,
okay.
customarily, 50-50. Seller pays for owner title insurance policy if there's a buyer, title policy if there's a loan, which is highly unlikely but
Right.
possible, buyer. Let's see here. There was something I wanted to say and our questions got us off. Trying to think.
About verifying the overbidder's funds.
Oh, the bailiff, well, the bailiff is the one who verifies the cashier's checks. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. So I've seen it where, the information, I couldn't find the information for how the cashier's check was supposed to be made out. Generally speaking, it should be made out to the estate of. The listing agent on this specific property my buyer wanted to go to court and overbid on had no idea what she was doing, just zero. Didn't want to share the court hearing information with me. Of course, she represented the buyer who had the accepted offer, was like keeping it secret. I actually, I tried to go to her broker, but she was her own broker, damn it. I actually was able to pull up the information because it's public record at the LA Superior Courthouse. And I was actually able to get the estate name. And all of this documentation, it actually has like the accepted offer price amount because they fill out this request for the confirmation hearing. So if you have a listing agent that is refusing to do the way things the way that they're supposed to, you can actually go directly to the courthouse and get the information. Secondly, the attorney of record is always going to be listed on these documents. So if you can't get the information you need from the listing agent, I mean, you can call up the probate attorney and find out. The probate attorney is probably really going to want to know that the agent that's handling the deal isn't handling it appropriately. Why? They probably referred that listing agent to the sellers. Can probably get them in some trouble.
Who's the cashier's check made out to?
So the estate. The cashier's check should be made out to the estate, and you're going to want the exact spelling, and this is going to be available in the legal documentation. But I would always confirm it with the listing agent. If the listing agent is unwilling or doesn't know, then ask for information. You can ask them to find out from the probate attorney, or you can ask them for the telephone number of the probate attorney directly. Now, I had no idea when this happened that I'd be able to procure that information from the courthouse. I was happy that I did, but let's say for some reason you didn't, or you didn't have time. You know what I would do is I would go to the court confirmation hearing, and I would actually tell the judge this, because the judge is probably going to postpone the sale, and they're going to require that the listing agent goes out and make sure that the information is publicly available so that the beneficiaries receive the highest price. Oh, FYI, the whole purpose of all of this court confirmation stuff is so that property is sold at the highest market value possible. It's so that, you know, beneficiaries that live in other states that don't know anything about the market, don't know anything about the property, maybe minor children, whoever, it's so that they don't get taken advantage of. So that's why court confirmation exists. Now, like I said, there are some instances where people who don't have to go with court confirmation might opt for it because they don't want to deal with maybe their relatives, or they don't feel qualified to deal with the sale themselves. All right, I'm gonna go until 2:20, and we'll cover as much of the documentation as we can until 2:20, and then I'm gonna break us for 20 minutes until 2:40, and then we'll finish up, okay? All right, so our first page is gonna be the listing agreement, okay? But I'm going to skip through all of that, right? I don't wanna look at the AD, because if you've taken listing contract with me before, you've seen the AD, right? I'm not gonna go through the PRBS or the wire fronted both. Oh, sorry, this is a purchase agreement. In any case, this lead documentation, the DA, the PRBS, and the WFA, I'm not gonna go over. But it is part of any listing or purchase contract. So we're gonna start with the probate purchase agreement. All right, so if you're making an offer on a probate property, whether or not it requires court confirmation, you are using this purchase contract. Just like if you're making an offer on income property, or you're using an income purchase agreement. The reason why is because there's special information that is listed in this that will save you some problems later. Also, if you're a listing agent and you accept an offer that's not probate purchase agreement, is it a valid offer? Probably not. Probably not.
Question,
Yes.
so the multiple unit or income property, is that 2 units or more or 4 units?
2 or more. Sorry, I skipped a page, or a section in, what I wrote out for you guys. Special car forms required. Let's just talk about that real quick before we actually go into them. So number 1 is gonna be probate listing addendum. For a probate listing, it's actually your standard listing contract, all right? It just has an addendum, this probate listing addendum, all right? Also, a probate advisory. You know how we have a seller's advisory on our listing contract? Well, I would leave that in there, but you also need to add the probate advisory. Also, if it is a probate, you're always going to need the representative capacity signature disclosure. RCSD-S in this instant. Why? Why? Because it's an estate, right? It's a representative or an administrator of the property. It is not a natural person. So the person who owned the property has passed. So you're always gonna need a representative capacity signature disclosure agreement. Also, number 4, it's exempt seller disclosure statement. This replaces our TDS, the transfer disclosure statement. An exempt seller disclosure statement is a disclosure statement for someone who has not lived at the property. How can I know all of the things I need to know and are asked on the transfer disclosure statement if I haven't lived at the property? So, does this exempt seller disclosure statement always apply to the administrator or executor of probate? No, it doesn't, because some of them lived there. Some of them lived with their parents, caring for them before they passed, maybe. So you'll need to gently find a way to make sure you're getting the correct disclosure statement, all right? This exempt seller disclosure statement also would extend to like an attorney that's handling an estate, anyone who hasn't lived in the property, doesn't know about the property. It could even apply to maybe someone who lives out of state and has been renting a property for like 20 years, okay? Although I would still encourage them to do the TDS because obviously their tenants have told them if there's a problem with the property.
So
Yes?
we get into this kind of situation in probate because they don't have a trust or will, right?
No, you go to probate even if you have a will. The only thing that keeps you from going to probate is a trust. That is the only way. So a will usually means that the probate sale wouldn't be subject to court confirmation. Although if the will doesn't say anything about selling the property, or if it's split amongst parties, even though it says that they can or dictate something about the property, it may still require court confirmation. It depends on the contents of the will.
It doesn't necessarily mean that they have no descendants.
No.
Use the house.
No, it does not mean that they have no descendants. It's very uncommon that a homeowner doesn't have descendants. Hey guys, thanks, sorry. This class is kind of hard for me to teach, so I need to focus. My analogy of this class is it's sort of like driving to your parents' house that you haven't lived at for 20 years. You know how to get there, but if you were trying to explain to someone who lived out of state the directions from their hotel, it might take you a second. So please help me focus. All right, the last document is probate purchase contract. So that, like I said, there's an addendum to the listing contract for probate deals, but there's an entirely separate purchase contract for probate. All right, so we're gonna go into the probate purchase agreement first.
So 1, 2, 3, 4 are for the listing side, and then 5 is from the buyer side, right? Yes.
Well, if you're on the listing side, you're gonna have all of these,
Oh,
right? Because
Right.
you're gonna,
sometimes you do
Right.
that offers.
I'll tell you, let's see. Well, you could have a buyer who's buying in representative capacity. I mean, typically, the answer is typically yes, but not always. And the probate advisory is automatically part of the probate purchase agreement. So you're gonna have one for the listing, an addendum, right? A probate advisory and a probate addendum. And on the probate purchase contract, it automatically includes a probate advisory. So you're gonna have 2 probate advisories in your complete file if you're the listing agent. You're gonna have 1 in your file if you're representing the buyer. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So on page 1, we're going to go ahead and just skip down to things that are unlike our regular residential purchase contract. So under section 1D, we have the standard close of escrow shall close on, and it leaves a blank for a finite date or a blank for a time frame after, days after acceptance basically. And below that it says, if court confirmation of the sale is required, escrow shall close within 10 or blank days from escrow holder or buyer's receipt of a copy of the court order confirming sale. Seller shall not be obligated to sign escrow instructions or incur any escrow costs prior to court confirmation. Remember, I told you it usually takes 1 to 3 weeks for the court to actually order the court order for closure of the sale, right? Does 10 days cut it? It probably doesn't cut it. So if you are a good agent and you're writing this offer, I want you to write in 30 days because we might need a building report that we can't close without, right? We might need other things. Remember, our documents are written for the entire state. They don't take in things into consideration like our very slow response from our city government.
Very slow.
Very slow,
30
right?
days after acceptance.
Huh?
30 days after.
I would write in 30, yeah. Let's see here. Bear with me, I'm just looking for things that are different here.
Can I ask you, why is there a finance breakdown of first and second when the finance is not a contingency? Why is it even mentioned?
Well, you still need to have the terms, the dollar amount listed. Because remember, the representative or administrator, when you're making an offer on a probate, they can still reject your offer, right? If you have a loan amount of 99%, as a seller, I'm probably gonna say, no, I'm not gonna accept your offer.
I see.
Just remember, if there's a loan involved, all of the work and formal approval should be done prior to actually making the offer. With the exception of, maybe you have a super, super high net worth buyer who has private banking relationships. They may not require the same timeframes and formal approval process that a standard buyer would. All right, let's see here. I have been, I don't know why it came up. I came in late to this hearing, and this is when I was just going to probate court confirmation hearings so that I could see and learn more about them. And I highly recommend doing it. It's open to the public. And remember, I told you you can look at the newspaper and find public information on it. So if you want to start looking into probate stuff, I would recommend going in and just seeing how it happens so you're comfortable and familiar. But I one time saw a judge ask for proof of funds for the entire purchase price. I've only ever seen it one time, and I've been at many, many hearings. So we talked about having the cashier's checks ready. You may want to also have your client have proof of funds for the entire purchase price, just in case. Better safe than sorry. All right. Let's see here. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and break you guys so I can just review this while I break you instead of reviewing it while you guys all sit here, okay? All right, I'll see you guys at 2:40, okay?
Cool.
I think, yeah, it's going, okay. Uh-oh, my cup's in the way.
Oops.
Oops.
So,
Say hi,
second part of the
everybody.
probate.
Hi, guys. All right,
BMO's teaching.
All right, Bima,
BMO's
what happens
teaching.
after probate?
the people, I have to lift her up because nobody can see her on the recorder. Oh, good BMO. All right. So, I have no idea what I did with my other pages. We were on page 2 of the purchase contract. I'm trying to find page 1 because I thought I highlighted something there. Oh, someone had asked a question about a loan and contingencies. Keep in mind this probate purchase contract, it's for both court confirmation and non-court confirmation. If you have non-court confirmation, it's absolutely like a normal sale in the fact that you can have a loan very easily. You can make requests for repairs. It's only court confirmation probate sales that you cannot. All right, so we're gonna go to page 2 of the probate purchase agreement. And at the very bottom, under section 4, not at the very bottom, but section 4, determination of type of probate and court confirmation, says check the option below that applies. A is type of probate. So type of probate is that seller shall inform buyer at the time of either blank acceptance or within the time for seller disclosures in paragraph 17, if it's part of a descendant's estate, conservatorship, or guardianship. When you take the listing, you're going to need to know if it's a probate, right?
Yeah.
So which box are you guys gonna check? Acceptance, right? Why would you do it during seller disclosure period? You have it in the MLS, you're telling everyone. Why? Because if they don't know, they're probably not even submitting the correct purchase contract, right? So you've got to call them up and say, whoops, sorry, my bad, it's a probate. I please need a PPA, probate purchase agreement. All right, so moving on to 4B, court confirmation undetermined. It says seller shall inform buyer at time of either blank acceptance or within time for seller disclosures in paragraph 17 if court confirmation is required. Once again, what's the answer to this one, guys?
Acceptance.
At time of acceptance, because you've already done it way ahead of time. All right, so 4B2, court confirmation is required. So remember, if it is with court confirmation, you're going to check this box. If it is not with court confirmation, you're not going to. But remember, this is the purchase agreement. So if you're representing the buyer, do you know all of these things? Well, you should, but only if the listing agent is doing their job properly. So if you know it's a probate, you want to call and confirm these items before you make an offer. Why? Because how are you probably going to advise your buyer, let alone fill out the purchase contract, if you don't know the answers to these questions? Okay? My guess is if it has court confirmation and your buyer has a loan, they may not want to make an offer anymore. Who knows? I mean, it's possible they could, but probably not. Under section B, you also have court confirmation not required. I don't see an instance, sorry, so I went back to 4B. I don't see an instance in which the first one, undetermined, would occur. So under 4A, you have the options court confirmation required, court confirmation not required, but do you see under 4B1, court confirmation undetermined? I don't see how you're making an offer on a property that's listed if they don't know if court confirmation is required, because they can't offer the property for sale under the legal requirements of confirmation if they don't know that it requires court confirmation. Like the ads we talked about, the 3 weeks of ads that you have to do continuously. So it's never going to be undetermined. It's always going to be either B2 or B3. All right, so I wanted to read section 5A at the bottom. When court confirmation is required, seller shall file a petition to confirm the sale of the property with the court. Seller shall notify buyer in writing of the court confirmation hearing date, time and location at least 15 or blank days prior to the court confirmation hearing date. Broker strongly recommends that buyer personally appear at the court confirmation hearing to protect buyer's position in the event of overbidding. All right, so this just gives you an actual contingency that you have to tell the buyer at least 15 days in advance about when and where that court confirmation hearing is going to take place. Why? What if they have a vacation planned? They need advance notice, right? So who's going to get the information about when the court date is first? The attorney, the probate attorney, right? And hopefully the probate attorney is on, is doing his job and he's on the ball. But if it's been a little while since you got an accepted offer and you submit the accepted offer to the probate attorney, you probably want to go ahead and call and follow up with the probate attorney to see if we actually got the court date. If you're nearing anywhere near the 15 days, you're going to be in some trouble because you need time to publish it, right? And you definitely need at least 15 days to give the accepted buyer notice. Let's see.
If the listing agent for some reason doesn't follow rules, what happens?
Well, you have contingency dates in your contract. If you're a buyer's agent, whether it's a probate deal or not, you should be calendaring your contingency dates. So if it's 15 days from the court date, well, now you all know that it generally takes around 30 days from the time an offer is accepted to get a court date. I would probably put a note for myself on day 10, 11, 12, if I'm the buyer's agent, to go ahead and give a call to the listing agent just to double check and see has the attorney contacted them and given them a court date yet. If not, oh, can you please call the probate attorney and double check with them. All right, and then we're gonna skip to page 6. And remember, I'm only going over the differences, like clauses that are not in the standard purchase contract, things that are in our probate purchase contract. On page 6, in section 16, it asks for vesting. Our purchase contracts, we write the buyer's names into the top, making an offer, right? Our normal residential purchase contract. Well, 16 vesting asks for how the buyer intends to take title. This means if I'm making an offer as Christen Tull on a residential purchase contract, that's fine. And in escrow, I tell them, I want to take title as Christen Tull, a single woman, or a married woman, sole and separate. Or, oops, I'm actually married. Now we have to add my husband to the contract, or I have to get a quitclaim deed. Well, the reason that it asks for vesting under section 16, it's not actually important in a non-court confirmation probate purchase, but in a probate confirmation purchase, when that probate attorney files the accepted offer information with the court so they can get that confirmation and overbid hearing date, one of the pieces of info on the document at the court that gets filed, it actually lists the buyer name and their vesting info out. I believe that the vesting information can be amended to the original accepted buyer offer at the time of the court confirmation hearing if for some reason they want to change it. Okay, right? So if you have a buyer who's making an offer and they want to hold title in an LLC, or they do or do not want their middle name, you need to find that out up front, because I'm not positive you can change it at the court confirmation hearing. But if you want to, I would see that as the only time you'd be able to do so is by court order, by the judge approving it. So when in doubt, how should your buyer write an offer if they're not married in their natural name? They can always transfer it into the title of a trust or an LLC or something after they own it, right? But if they don't have the entity formed, or if they're married, I mean, you have to purchase property the only legal ways that you can. So if the entity doesn't exist, you can't write an LLC in here. You can't write and or a sign, because when you have a legal document that has to reference a party name, it has to be an actual name. It can be an LLC, it can be a corporation, but you'd actually have to have those documents, and you wouldn't be able to, amend that later. Okay, so just, that's one of the only differences besides the initial stuff we just talked about in the entire purchase contract for probate.
Void if the contract, LLC's not ready.
Yeah, if you're writing an offer in the name of an LLC that doesn't exist, is that a valid offer? No. All right.
Is the offer, once it's accepted, is it filed with the court, obviously?
I don't know. I do know that the probate attorney handles all of that, and I know that information from the purchase contract is written onto other legal documents. Do you remember when I told you about the time the listing agent wouldn't give me any information on when an overbid hearing was taking place? I only know about item 16, I wouldn't even know because I went to the court and I actually got that documentation and it listed like the buyer name and all of that on there.
It's not like, online where you can view it, scan, like, you know.
I think I actually went to the courthouse. I could have called. I don't remember, I think I did both. I think I went to the courthouse. I think I called and I went to the courthouse because I got transferred around, is what happened.
Which courthouse?
It was, Stanley Mosque, the downtown LA. Okay. So, we're gonna skip on now to the buyer's inspection advisory. That is your standard buyer inspection advisory like you have in your RPA. So, just notate that. And now we're gonna go on to the probate advisory. So this probate advisory is something that would be, automatically included with the probate purchase agreement. All right.
Here you are.
After the end of the probate purchase agreement, you have the probate advisory. Just like in our regular residential purchase agreement, we have the buyer's advisory.
Right.
This is automatically included, and this is the buyer's probate advisory. And if you look at section 1, it talks about exemptions. And remember we talked about how the seller may give a document called the ESD, Exempt Seller Disclosure Statement, versus the TDS. So in section 1, it says seller is exempt from providing buyer with a real estate transfer disclosure statement, natural hazard disclosure statement, and a Melrose district lien disclosure, which is not very common here. I'm not even gonna go into it, but it's not very common. Don't worry about not knowing what it is. Only if you specialize in like Playa del Rey area. Let's see. So in our probate purchase agreement, you know, just like in our regular residential purchase agreement, it talks about some costs, like seller to pay for. So the seller typically pays for a natural hazard disclosure statement, right? But our advisory right here is telling us they're exempt from it. It's also saying that they're exempt from the TDS. It does not mean that they are exempt from the exempt seller disclosure statement, which is included in this package. And it also does not mean that they are actually exempt from providing a TDS if they lived in the property and do have full knowledge of the property. But you would only know that if you're the listing agent. You're not going to know that, right, if you're the buyer's agent, is my guess. Okay. So, under exemptions, number 2, earthquake guide. Seller is exempt from providing either a homeowner's or commercial property owner's guide to earthquake safety. If you use a transaction coordinator, you probably don't know what that is. We have this little like receipt booklet that we as agents have to sign off on and our clients have to sign off on. If you use our TC Brian, he sends them this big fat package, like a booklet about earthquake and environmental safety. In any case, you don't have to do that with a probate. Smoke detector. The sale is exempt from the state requirements that for single family residences, operable smoke detectors be in place and that a written statement of compliance be provided to buyer. What does this mean? This is the only type of deal there is out there, guys, where we do not have to have retrofitting as far as smoke detectors are concerned. Does that tell us that we don't have to have it for anything else? No. So what else do we need under that retrofitting? Carbon monoxide, earthquake shutoff valve, low flow toilets. So absolutely, we still need to have some retrofitting done. But for whatever reason, the smoke detector requirement is removed. Yeah, I don't know. And you'll see under requirements, I'm just skip down to the next section, requirements, the last one, water heater. See, it says it's not exempt from the state requirement that water heaters be anchored, braced, or strapped. So for some reason, some of the retrofitting requirements are still required. Some of them were exempt. I don't know why. My thought is now that our requirements are to have combination smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, you go ahead and just have the retrofitter do everything.
Yeah.
Right? As an agent or as a seller, I don't exactly know the difference and I don't want that liability on me. So because some are required, my advice to my seller in this instance is go ahead and just do all of it. Okay. requirements, disclosure, seller is not exempt from common law and statutory duties considering fraud and deceit. Really, that's great. Even though the specific TDS form is not required to be completed, seller remains obligated to disclose material facts affecting the value and desirability of the property. So, I mean, it doesn't, just because the TDS isn't required doesn't mean I don't have to tell someone something they should know, which is why we have that ESD, the exempt seller disclosure statement. All right. 2, hazard zones. So, the NHD statement, right? Part of that is hazard zones. So I'm being told that the NHD statement is not a requirement we have to give to the seller or the buyer, yet the hazard zone is. Do you guys know where the hazard zones are? I don't. Guess where that's at, always.
On the NHD?
Now on the NHD report. So what am I telling my seller to get anyhow?
NHD.
That's right. It's $99, just do it. I'm gonna skip 3 since we already discussed the water heater. 4, lead-based paint. Seller is not exempt from the federal obligation to disclose known lead-based paint hazard. That's your FLD. The lead-based paint disclosure is required on every single transaction, including leases there are in the state of California. Most of the time, owners have no knowledge of lead-based paint. But if they do, they're obligated to disclose it. Has anyone here ever had an instance where they got a disclosure or made a disclosure where they did have knowledge? No. I mean, what, we're 2019 now? What was it, 1978? So, gosh, that's a long time ago. I'm sure there would be dozens and dozens of layers of paint by then. It probably would be very difficult for someone to know. All right, so under requirements, carbon monoxide detectors. Remember we talked about smoke detectors. They're exempt from that, but hey, in LA, our requirements, our city requirements are more restrictive, and we have combo smoke detectors, carbon monoxide. So you're still doing retrofitting. Basically, I would go ahead and take a pen and I would X out the exemption part on your notes, just so you know when you talk to your client about the offer they're making, even though these are listed here, they don't actually apply because of the way that our city and local requirements are more restrictive, and what is still required under state law, we're required to do it all. All right. We're not gonna go over 6 and 7. Does everyone know what 6 is, database disclosure?
No.
Megan's Law, sex offenders. Yeah, so we used to have a disclosure for it called Megan's Law disclosure. We no longer have it. It's part of our regular contract. Basically, it's an item of information for the buyer that they can go online and go find out where all the little red dots for the scary sex offenders are on any given map. And then tax withholding, you don't need to worry about that. That is something that happens for the seller that escrow handles, but the way our state law is written makes it the buyer's responsibility to make sure that the seller is taxed appropriately. All right, so we're moving on to the next section, 8, broker's inspection. You're still required to do an avid on the property. B, agency. If you have a dual agency, you are still required to disclose it. You are still required to disclose your responsibilities as far as confirmation of agency, but you don't need to worry about that because that's the AD form that automatically populates anytime you write any kind of purchase contract. All right. Other considerations. I mean, I think these are all pretty self-explanatory, that local law can have more restrictive rules, which is why we still have to do all those things like to cross off on page 1 at the top. Death, that if the probate's being sold because of death of the owner of the property and the buyer has concerns about the manner, location, or details of the death, then the buyer should direct any of their questions directly to the administrator or executor, not to the real estate agent, right? The real estate agent might not know anything about it. They are still allowed to ask questions about it, and whether or not the representative, the executor, or administrator likes it, they are legally required to answer those questions. As far as stock cooperatives and court confirmation independent authority, I don't think we need to go over that at all. It's talking about how court has the authority to circumvent any agreements we have in our contracts. All right, probate listing addendum and advisory. So this is actually the different probate advisory. This is the one that is to the, like the name says, probate listing addendum and advisory. This is the advisory that goes to the listing agreement. Because remember, we're using our standard residential listing agreement, no matter what type of probate deal we are listing. So it says that the following terms and conditions are hereby incorporated in and made a part of the, and this is where you check residential listing agreement, and you would reference on 2 lines below the date that that residential listing agreement was drafted, and you'd refer to the seller here. And my guess is, in the line below, you would list Keller Williams, because it's not me, I'm not a broker, I'm an agent. Even if I have a broker license, if I hang my license at Keller Williams is a broker of record. All right, so down below, under item number 1, we are identifying whether the property is part of a probate estate, conservatorship, or guardianship. So it's automatically probate estate, right? If it's a conservatorship or guardianship, that's some information you would get from the attorney that's there, that's helping you out with this, okay? 2, the listing period shall be the shorter of 90 days or the length of time specified in the listing. Remember, I told you, maximum number of days is 90 days, but you can do shorter if you want. I don't see how you're gonna fulfill all of your legal requirements in less than 90 days, but you could try, I guess. 3, court confirmation of the sale is either the first checkbox, required, also referred to as limited authority, or may be required, which means full authority. And when it says may be required full authority, may be required refers to the fact that it is optional by the administrator or executor of the estate, the representative of the estate, right? Because if they have full authority, they can go ahead and sell the property just like normal, or they can say, I don't have time for this, I don't want to fight with my family about this, I don't feel qualified to do this, I'm gonna go ahead and do court confirmation anyhow. Just an FYI, when I was trying to get a listing once that I didn't get with someone who had full authority, so they had the option. Their probate attorney told them they should go ahead and do court confirmation. I asked her why. Why would someone want to do court confirmation when they don't have to do it? So I asked her the same things I asked you. Is there some contention going on? Do you not have time for this? What would be the reason you want to do that? She said, well, because the attorney said that's the best way to do it. Which I don't necessarily agree. I asked you, what is your ideal outcome in this sale?
No court.
Right? No court confirmation is the easiest and fastest way to sell the property, right? She was very concerned about selling it quickly, right? There was no other motivation. She needed the money out of it. So my advice to her was, you should talk to your probate attorney, because let me tell you, I don't see how you're going to initially apply for the process of probate, and the process of probate, on the shortest end, is 90 days, 3 months, from the time you initiate probate proceedings. This doesn't even have to do with the sale of the property yet. We're just talking about probate proceedings, because remember, this isn't the entire estate being debts and all assets. All right, so that generally takes about 90 days. Then once the court approves that, there's going to be a time period, a waiting time period, where they notify any potential debtors, so that any debts have time to come in, so that they're considered in the disposition of the assets of the estate. And then once all of that's said and done, you get your representative appointed and you get those letters. I think that takes another 30 days for the court to actually give letters to the administrator or executor that finally allows them to go ahead and list the property. So if this client wanted to sell quickly, I'm like, well, I think the shortest you can get a probate done in total, because remember, after you sell the property, then you're waiting 30 plus days for a court confirmation or overbid, and then you're generally waiting 30 days for close of escrow after that court confirmation or overbid. It's probably about 6 months. If you want to sell quickly, I don't see why you're going to go for court confirmation. She did. I don't know what happened. They sold it. I don't know what happened, but I have no idea why someone who would want to sell as quickly as possible would go court confirmation route, whether or not they listed with me. In any case, sorry, I think I skipped our page. So yeah, may be required is optional. Section 4, checkbox, that blank checkbox says information about this listing will not be provided to the MLS specified in the listing. Why would someone want to do that?
Because they don't want the have to be, I don't know, they don't want too
They're gonna
much
shop it?
exposure.
Oh,
They
right.
just want something privately done or something.
Well, maybe you can do that with a non-court confirmation requirement, but you can't do that with a court confirmation required. Why? Because you have to make it public knowledge. If it is non-court confirmation, I don't see the point to this at all. I don't think I've ever seen this checked. Remember I told you about those other types of probate sales though? Like private sale, auction, maybe someone might check it then. I don't know. But in our case, since we're real estate agents, that's probably never going to be checked. So I just wanted you to be aware of what that was and why it probably doesn't apply to us. I don't know if agents are involved in like the auctions or whatever. It's not standard practice here. 5, compensation specified to broker and any cooperating broker is subject to any restrictions imposed by California Probate Code and the determination of the court. Yay, it's why I got 2.5% instead of 2%
Awesome.
when I went to that hearing. So yeah, it didn't matter that the probate deal, my buyer got it overbid, was at 5% and cooperating broker for me was listed at 2. California state law says 5 or less and that it's split equally. All right, 6, the dispute resolution paragraph is deleted in its entirety. So our listing agreement, right, it has a dispute resolution paragraph that says it would go to like mediation, arbitration. Well, that's not the case. Probate's exempt from that. 7, the probate advisory is attached to this agreement. So remember I told you, if you don't remember what documents you need, if you're not sure what you're doing, when in doubt, what should you do?
House attorney.
Yeah, don't, maybe come to Kristen. But what if it is 10 o'clock at night? Please don't come to Kristen. Please open zip forms, go to car forms, type in the word probate in that search bar. It is invaluable. And once you type that in, I want you to look at read every single form in its entirety that has the word probate in it that comes up when you type that probate word in there. That search bar will teach you more than I could ever teach you in a lifetime. All right. So when you read those forms, sorry, I digress. When you read those forms, item 7, the probate advisory is attached to this agreement. So if I typed in probate and car forms, and this was the first one I read, I would now know all of a sudden, oh, I also need this advisory. So I would attach that to my listing agreement. Then I would maybe go to Kristen, and at least I'd have the right documents so that she could eat lunch this time. All right, so that's the end of the probate listing addendum and advisory. I'm going to move on to the probate advisory. So the probate advisory, it goes over all of the same, oh wait, I'm looking at the wrong one, hold on. Okay, it is exactly the same. However, one needs to go for the buyer's probate purchase offer, right, because the buyer sees that, and one gets attached to the standard listing contract that the probate addendum and this go attached to. So it is exactly the same as the probate advisory for the probate purchase agreement. So we're not going to go over that again because we already did. I'm going to go over, instead of the representative capacity signature disclosure first, I'm going to go over the exempt seller disclosure first, all right? So since someone who hasn't lived in the property can't fully answer the questions on the normally legally required transfer disclosure statement. And they are still required to make any known disclosures they have about the property. And because our brokerage also requires it, if you're not doing a TDS, you are doing an ESD, exempt seller disclosure. All of these questions are pretty no-brainer. I'm gonna skip down to 4A because you should be able to fill out the top on your own. 4A, within the last 3 years, has there been a death of an occupant upon the property? Keep in mind, if you check yes to any of these questions, you're going to need to fill in something for the explanation at the bottom. If you check yes to a question and your client does not you, sorry, agents are not ever supposed to be completing this document. It's always the seller or the administrator or the executor that fills out this document. So if your seller checks yes to anything, even if it's a nonsensical answer, there does need to be something written at the bottom. So if you check yes and you leave this explanation section blank, if you have another agent like me on the other side and I need more time, I'm going to use it against you and I'm going to get 5 more days. I'm going to kick it back to you and ask for it to be completed. It's not, it's kind of a sleazy move, but if I needed 5 days, I would take them. All right, B, an order from a government health official identifying the property as being contaminated by methamphetamine. So this is, disclosures are really boring. I think if anyone's done disclosure class with me before, I have fun with this one. And I asked my seller, have you guys been cooking any meth on the property? Any Breaking Bad up in this?
Now that illegal, marijuana is legal.
This is a question only about methamphetamine.
Oh, only methamphetamine.
Only about methamphetamine. I guess I don't know if heroin's created in a lab, but maybe you can have a heroin lab. Maybe you can have a whatever lab, but if you have a methamphetamine lab, then you gotta talk about it on here. No, by law, we are required to disclose anything that we're aware of as a seller or an agent that might materially affect the value of a property to any prospective buyer. So yes, anything that they're doing that could, affect a buyer's want for the property or affect the value of the property, it does need to be put on here, but it would be under a different section. We would disclose it. No, on this one it doesn't have it. So on our regular TDS, it has a section to disclose like any other item that might affect the material value. If you have something like that and you're using the ESD, draft an addendum and make an addendum to it and have the seller fill out the addendum since there's not a place here. All right, but they do need to answer all these questions. A lot of these are silly. So asking about release of an illegal controlled substance on or beneath the property, if it's in or adjacent to an industrial use zone, nuisance created by industrial zone, whether or not it's located within 1 mile of a former federal or state ordinance location. Oh wow, this is the first time I've seen this. In general, an area once used for military training purposes that may contain potentially explosive munitions. I guess.
These things must have happened and this is why they're in here.
Right. Yeah, they had to at some point. Whether the property is a condo or located in a planned unit development, that's, you'd probably be able to tell that by looking at it, but it does need to be filled out correctly. Insurance claims affecting the property within the past 5 years. So, if you have an administrator or executor that wasn't living on the property and is filling out something like an ESD, they probably don't know that much about it. They may or may not know about insurance claims. Our sellers' responsibility is only to disclose and fill out to the best of their knowledge. We're not grasping, we're not guessing. If they don't know, they should be vague, they should be general. My advice to my client is don't go looking for something. If you don't know about it, you don't know about it. There's no need to disclose something you don't know about. All right.
What if whatever substance is underneath the house adds value to the property because it's like a business, extra or extra money
My guess is if they know about it, they're probably gonna capitalize on that before selling the property.
There's gold.
This is.
Yeah. Yeah, if they, I don't know, I'd be under there with a shovel, and then we'd put it on the market. All right, let's see, I, matters affecting title of the property. J, material facts or defects affecting the property not otherwise disclosed to the buyer. Oh, there we go, that's our general disclosure. Remember I was telling you draft an addendum and disclose it? You don't have to, you can check J, yes, and then write your explanation in here. If your explanations exceed the amount of space in here, you can take a sheet of paper and just attach it to it and say, see, continued attached, all right?
Does it have to be written or typed?
Either. Legible. I have actually, as a buyer's agent, kicked disclosures back to the listing agent and said, I can't read this. And until I receive a legible copy, I don't consider your contingency met.
Wow.
I didn't get the seller disclosures if we can't read them. Oh, and by the way, be a good listing agent. You should read your seller's disclosures before you send them out to someone. If you can't read them, you probably need to go have them redone before you're sending them out to any buyer's agent. Okay, let's see. Okay, plumbing fixtures on property that are non-compliant plumbing fixtures as defined by Civil Code section 1101.3. Do you think your sellers know what that is?
No.
No. So what's their answer gonna be?
No.
Unless they're a plumber and they know. Maybe. Like I said, they may not have been in the property for a long time. All right, so that is the end of the ESD. And we're gonna move on very briefly to the representative capacity signature disclosure. If it's a probate deal, you always have this document because it is never the natural property owner, right? It is now an administrator or executor. So you're gonna fill this out at the top. This is a disclosure to the, when are you guys getting this? What is this going with? That's right, the listing agreement. So what checkbox are you gonna check? The checkbox that says listing agreement. Dated, all right? And then you're gonna list the property address. Then the second to last line in this top section, it says between blank seller, between blank buyer, and then it has a checkbox listing broker. If this is at time of the listing, is there a buyer? No.
No.
So you're going to check the box for listing broker. And then you're going to list the seller's name. What's the seller's name? It's going to be the actual name of the executor or administrator in their official title. It will actually have like a comma, executor, or comma, administrator of the blah, blah, blah estate. Where do you think you get this information?
The attorney.
That's right, the probate attorney, not title. This is the one instance where title is not gonna have the accurate info. Okay, so moving on, you're gonna go ahead and you are going to, if this is for probate, you're going to select 1D. All right, and you're going to select most likely estate. It's a very rare to be something else, and if that's the case, the probate attorney is definitely going to make you fully aware of it before you start filling out stuff like this. All right, identified by superior court case name as, where are you going to get this information? Once again, you're going to get this from the probate attorney. Case number, you're going to get this from the probate attorney. And then the seller is going to sign, date, you're going to sign and date, and you're all good. You're ready to get started with prepping for your probate listing. That's it, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me know if you have any questions. You're welcome.
How can we watch the class?